everyone, this is Not From This World, and welcome to my next tutorial. Today I want to show you a couple of little tricks that Daz Studio can do to help you pose. So I'm going to tell you how to link two characters together. We can chain them together. And then the second thing I want to show you is how to pin an object or a character so that it is stationary and you can manipulate and change the pose. Now, both of these techniques are pretty handy, but unfortunately they're not perfect. And so you will still need to go in and do a little bit of tweaking to get the pose correct, but it's a pretty creative way to set up some interesting poses. Now, the first thing I want to show you is how we can link two characters together. So you can see I have these two characters. These are Genesis 8 characters, and we're going to link them together. So there may be an instance where you want both of these characters to move together, and we're going to demonstrate how to do that right now. So the first thing I want is, let's say these two girls are going to hold hands, and we're going to want to move these hands together so you don't have to pose them separately every time. That is a pretty easy thing to do. So what we do is we go up to Create, and I'm going to go down to where it says Create New Null, which is right here. And I'm going to create that, and you can name it anything you want. I'm not going to name it, but I'm just going to call it Null, but you could call it Hands or anything you want. Hit Accept. So once we have created the null, just make sure it's selected, and we're going to move it into the relative position where we want it. So you can see I'm moving it close to these girls' hands, and you want to get it relatively close. All right, like that. And then we're going to select the part of their arm that we want linked together. Now I want their wrists linked or their hands linked. So I'm going to go and select the first girl's hand. Make sure you select the hand. And then I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to go to Create, and I'm going to go down to New IK Chain. I'm going to select that. And again, I can name it anything I want. I'm just going to keep it what it is. I'm going to hit Accept. And what that does is, if you look over here, it creates this chain, this IK chain. Now I am going to take this and immediately parent it to the null. So I can go to Change IK Bridget 8.2, and I can change it, and I'm going to select it and parent it to the null. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the other girl's hand. So I've got to select her hand. I'm going to go up to Create, Create New IK Chain. All right, I can name it if I want to, and hit Accept. It's going to form this chain. So now Adeline has a chain. I'm going to right click, change the parent, scroll down here to null. All right, now their wrists are linked. So if I want to move this, what I have to do is I have to select the null. Now, I like to work in this right here, this little arrow. It's the node selection tool. That's where I usually work in Daz Studio. But to move the null here, we're going to select the one right next to it that is called the universal tool. And some of you may already work in this. I just don't like seeing this all the time in my scene as I'm working. But now, once I select that, I can grab these arrows, and with my null selected, I can move these girls' hands together. And you can see it's not exactly perfect. And you may need to change a few things, but this is a really kind of cool way to link two things together. So as we try this technique, it's important to understand that we can only link two figures. So we can't link like this girl's arm to a static prop. Now, I have seen people claim that you can do that and you can link them, but I haven't had success with this. So if you figure out how to do it, let me know. But supposedly, and I'll show you, if you create a static prop, which is like this cube, and I have this cube here, you should be able to select the cube, go over here to Edit, Object, Rigging, and then it says Convert Prop to Figure. So when you do that, what it should do is convert it into a figure. And if you look over on your scene, it will say that this cube is now a figure cube. Now, once you have that, I'm going to scale this down just a little bit to make it easier. You're supposed to be able to link the two together. Now, I keep running into the problem where it still says that I cannot link them. And I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to create a new null. So I'm going to go create new null, and I'll just keep it named null2. So here's my new null. I'm going to move it into position, and I'm going to try and link the girl's hand to the cube. So to do this, I'm going to select the girl's hand, make sure her hand is selected. I'm going to go to Create, New Eye Keychain. I've got that. I select it. And now I've got a chain here for her hand. So I'm going to take this. I can also take it, and if I want to, I can drag it into the null. So I can right click it and then select new parent, or I can just drag it if you have a small amount of scene. Now I have to do the same thing with the cube. So when I select the cube, I'm going to go create new eye keychain, and I'm going to get an error. Supposedly I shouldn't get this error, but I do. So if you know how to change this properly, the static prop into a figure, let me know. But as of right now, I cannot figure out how to do that. To get around this, we can go back to our old technique of taking this object, selecting it, and then I can go to change figure cube parent, and when I do that, I can find this girl's name is Adeline, so I can scroll down and find her left hand. So here's her left hand, and I can click on that, accept it, And see, now it's tied to this girl's hand. So that makes it easy. See, this is from a previous tutorial that I gave, something very simple. Now, I can also link two objects with the chain that are figures. So now our heroine is caught and she's in a restraint. If I click on the restraint is also a figure. So I can select a part of the restraint and I can link her to that restraint. And so I just have to go through this same process. So I'm going to deselect everything. I'm going to go to Create, New Null, and this is going to be null 3, so I'm going to accept it. Now when I accept it, it's always going to be at coordinate 0, 0, 0. So if I scroll out, see, this is where my null is, which is a pain in the butt. So I always have to take that null and I have to move it to where my figure is. So now I'm going to zoom in and see it takes a little manipulation if you don't have your figure at 0, 0. But now I've got it where I want. And what I want to do is I want to link her arm to this restraint. And I can do that just the same way. So I'm going to select her and I'm going to get her wrist or her hand because I think that's going to be the closest to the restraint. And then I'm going to go to Create, New Eye Keychain. Alright, that's going to create that new eye keychain for her. I'm going to right hand click on it and say to parent it to our new null, which is null 3. Hit select. Then I got to select part of this restraint. And if I look, I think I want to select the very end of it, which is right here. So once I have that selected, I can go Create, New Eye Keychain, and now I've created that, accept it, and I can take it, parent it to my new null, which is null 3. Okay, now I have this connection. What's cool about this is if I go to null 3, I can move both the character and the restraint arm together now. Now, see, this is where I was telling you it's not perfect, but I can kind of adjust and move this restraint to a new position, and her arm is kind of moving with it. But then I would have to figure out how I could of course reposition her arm so that it matches better. Alright. Now there is another way to do this that actually might be a little bit better, and I want to show you that, and that is to pin it. So I'm actually going to, we'll just make this easy, and I'm going to delete that null. So I'm going to get rid of that null. Alright, and we're going to link or pin this girl so that this arm doesn't move. So maybe she is struggling and trying to escape from the restraint, but the restraint's not moving. So in this case, I can pin it. And by pinning the arm will not move. And so to do this, I'm going to go up to this little icon here that's called the Active Pose tool, and I'm going to select it. And that's going to allow me to move the figure. So once I have this selected, I can go on. You see how my cursor has a little bone. See, now I can take this, and if I click on her, I can move her around and repose, which is kind of cool, but it can get really messy. So once I have that, see, I can move her, but I don't want her arms really moving. Maybe I want her to twist and fight the restraint, but I don't want her arms to move because they're supposed to be tied to the restraint. So what I can do is I can pin these. To pin, I'm going to make sure I have this Active Pose tool selected. And for me, I need to open up my tool settings display. So it's right here where this arrow and the little gear is. So I'm going to select that. And then I have this tool settings. Now what I can do with the tool settings is I can select the girl, and I'm going to select again her hand, and I am going to hit toggle pins. So when I hit toggle pins, what that does is it pins, or it's supposed to pin her wrist in place. I can go over here and do the same thing, and if I select her hand, I can hit toggle pin, and see, it's creating a pin in that spot. I'm going to do the same thing with her ankles. Pin her ankle, and then pin her ankle. Now, once I have this selected, I can grab her and I can move her around. But see, we have a problem here. This restraint is parented to our girl. And so if you do this, it's going to move her and the restraint. So I don't want that. So what I have to do is I have to unparent the rack. So I'm going to double click on the rack. And then once I have the rack, I can right click and I can say unparent rack. Now the rack is not parented to her. So make sure that when you are doing this that you don't want to move them both together, or you need to reparent the rack back to the girl. But now that the rack is unparented, I can grab the girl and see, I can start to move her so she can start fighting. Now, this is just a technique. I really like how her legs are really pinned well, but her arms are not. And I haven't figured this out why, but you can pose and move her around, and then you might have to do a little bit of manipulation where you have to take that rack perhaps and adjust it. So, I mean, we could then start to pose to try and get her in a position. But this is a pretty cool way. You can grab any part of her and try and move her as she tries to pull away from this. I don't know why her legs are really pinned well, and her arms are not. I think once you move her too much, the arms just end up moving. So you have to play around with this, and you can get some really cool poses where they're struggling, or you get some unique positions that you may not get by just doing our classic posing. All right, so I hope that helps a little bit, and let me know in the comments what you think. If you have techniques that are working better than this, let me know, because I would really like to be able to pose easier. So creating chains and then pinning do help you pose, but remember, it's not perfect. All right, I'll see you later. Catch you on the flip side.